Hey, so today we're diving into John 10 verses 22 to 33. Picture this, it's winter, Hanukkah in Jerusalem, and Jesus is right there in the temple. People are crowding around him, asking some pretty intense questions. And what he says in response, well, it's going to reveal something really profound about who he is. Stick with me, because this story is about to get eye-opening. Alright, so picture this. Jesus is in Jerusalem. It's the time of the Feast of Dedication, also called Hanukkah. You know, that celebration of light, candles, and all that, and the scene is buzzing with people. The Jews, well, they're curious, maybe even a little on edge. They approach him directly, no beating around the bush. They ask, how long are you going to keep us in suspense if you are the Messiah? Tell us plainly. You can almost hear the impatience in their voices, the eyebrows raised, a mix of hope and challenge. They want clarity, and they want it now. Jesus doesn't flinch. He doesn't jump right into a yes or no like they expect. Instead, he leans into a metaphor, and it's a classic one, the sheep and the shepherd. He says, I told you, and you don't believe. The works I do in my Father's name, they testify about me. Pause. Let that sink in. He's basically saying, look, my actions, everything I've been doing already point to who I am. Yup. But here's the kicker. They're not seeing it. They're not recognizing it. Why he spells it out in a way that cuts straight to the heart of it. But you don't believe because you are not my sheep. Whoa, that hits differently. That hits. Imagine him saying this. It's not a finger-pointing accusation. Not exactly, but it's like, the reason this isn't clicking for you isn't because I've been unclear. It's because your hearts aren't tuned in. There's a tension in the air now. You can feel it, the crowd, the questioning, the demand for proof, and then this statement that separates belief from unbelief in a single line. Then he lays it out with that sheep imagery, and it's striking. He says, my sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one can snatch them out of my hand. Now, think about that. Sheep hearing the shepherd's voice, not just any noise, not just empty words or announcements, but a voice that resonates, that carries authority and familiarity. The sheep recognize it. They respond, they follow, they trust. And here, Jesus is the shepherd. He's the guide, the protector, the one who knows every single one of his sheep intimately. It's a gentle but firm explanation. Belief is relational, not just a checklist of signs. It's about connection. Those who belong to him, who are tuned into him, will recognize his voice. But for those who don't, well, it might look like stubbornness, or maybe it looks like skepticism. That's the tension the Jews are demanding, a kind of proof they can hold in their hands, a sign they can point to. But Jesus is saying, in essence, faith isn't just about seeing, it's about hearing, knowing, following. And there's more. Jesus says, I and the Father are one. That's the mic drop moment. It's bold, it's declarative, and it escalates the tension even more. The crowd doesn't just have a curiosity now, they're confronted with a claim that shakes the foundations of what they thought they knew. But he doesn't stop there. He circles back, calmly, to the sheep metaphor. He's consistent. He's patient in his explanation. It's almost like he's saying, let me explain this in a way that you can understand if you're really listening. Here's the drama, they're still not fully grasping it. Their demand is clear. If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly. They want black and white, a simple answer, a verbal stamp that they can repeat to each other. But Jesus keeps pushing back, not in a confrontational way, but in a way that makes them think. Your lack of belief isn't because I've hidden the truth. It's because your hearts aren't aligned with mine. You're not part of my flock. So my words, my works, they're not landing the way they do for those who are. Pause. Imagine that for a second. You're in the crowd. You want proof. You're watching someone do incredible things, miracles that people are whispering about, healings, signs, teachings. Yet there's a calm that says, yes, this is me. But if your heart isn't open, it won't make sense to you. It's both frustrating and profound. The tension is thick, the demand for plain statements versus the subtle, relational truth of knowing Jesus as the shepherd. Then comes this subtle reminder that's easy to overlook if you're not listening closely. He talks about the protection he offers, the safety of the sheep in the shepherd's hand. No one can snatch them out of my hand. There's reassurance there, a soft note in the middle of this tense interaction. It's almost like he's saying, for those who are listening, who belong, there is security, there is life, there is a promise that outlasts the immediate arguments and doubts. So there's this back and forth energy. On one side, you have the Jews pressing, pushing, seeking clarity, wanting proof, a concrete label. On the other, you have Jesus, calm and measured, offering explanation through imagery, through metaphor, through relational truth. It's like he's walking them from an intellectual demand for evidence into a more profound realization belief isn't just about signs, it's about relationship, recognition, and trust. And the sheep metaphor keeps it grounded. Sheep aren't complicated creatures. They follow the voice they know. Simple, right, but it's also subtle. Recognition, familiarity, hearing the shepherd's voice. It's intimate. Jesus isn't just performing miracles for spectacle. He's connecting with his people, his sheep. Those who belong, who hear and recognize, they respond naturally. Those who don't, no amount of spectacle will convince them. That's why the proof they're asking for falls flat. They're not tuned in. The story closes on that tension unresolved, really. The Jews are still questioning, still pressing, still wanting a plain statement, a direct label. And Jesus has given them more than a label. He's given them insight into why they struggled to believe in the first place. He's exposed the root of their disbelief. They're not his sheep. They haven't recognized his voice. They haven't followed. The crowd is left with the tension of wanting simplicity, but being confronted with a relational, spiritual reality. So, take a breath with that. You can almost feel the weight of the moment, the hustle of the feast of dedication around them, the pressing crowd, the voices clamoring for proof, and then Jesus, steady, explaining that belief isn't about ticking boxes. It's about hearing the shepherd's voice, knowing him, following him. Those who are his, they get it. Those who aren't, they don't. And that's the heart of John 10:22-24, captured in the push and pull of expectation, tension, and divine explanation. So picture this, I'm in Bethlehem, and I get this chance to just hang out in the hills early in the morning, and there are these two flocks of sheep. Now, I'm not exaggerating, these flocks have their own Bedouin shepherds, each one quietly walking along, guiding their sheep, calling out to them in Arabic, and there's something mesmerizing about watching it. The sheep aren't just wandering randomly, they're attentive, they're responsive. You see the shepherd call, maybe a long rolling sound, and immediately the flock perks up, shifts direction, follows. And it's not like the other flock nearby is listening, they're completely tuned into their own shepherd. There's a kind of natural order, a kind of rhythm that you can almost feel in your chest, like the hills themselves are breathing along with the sheep. I have to admit, part of me is thinking, I don't even understand Arabic, yet somehow, I get the point instantly. The tone, the rhythm, the familiarity of the voice, it's all the sheep need. And honestly, it's kind of funny too. I'm standing there thinking, if only I spoke Arabic like these shepherds, maybe I could call the sheep around too, but the humor doesn't take away from the reality these sheep know their shepherd. They recognize his voice, and it's immediate, no hesitation, no confusion, just trust and response. As I watch, I notice that some of the sheep start straying, nibbling at some grass off to the side, but then the shepherd's call brings them right back. The voice carries authority, yes, but it's also comforting. It's the shepherd saying, "This way, this is safe, I've got you." And the sheep respond not because they're forced, but because they trust the shepherd. They know he cares for them. And it's interesting, even the lambs, the little ones, follow along, mimicking the adults, but still reacting to the shepherd's voice in their own instinctive way. It's natural, it's learned, it's beautiful. Now, here's the kicker, the other flock nearby, same scene. Different shepherd, same pattern, and the sheep of one flock don't mix with the other. It's like they've got this built-in GPS tuned to their own shepherd's voice. I can't help but think this is exactly what Jesus was talking about in John 10. His sheep, his followers, they recognize his voice. They respond, they follow. Not because of spectacle or argument, but because they know him. They trust him. They're tuned into him. The contrast is striking, too. Watching someone else's flock, you might think, oh, maybe if I shout loud enough, these will come over. But nope. They're not listening. They're loyal, attentive, connected in a way that's almost instinctual. And that's exactly the point. Belief, trust. Following isn't just about seeing something impressive, it's about relationship, recognition, familiarity. The sheep know the shepherd, they hear the voice, and they move. By the time the sun is higher, the flocks are moving along their paths. The shepherd's occasionally bending down to adjust a stray or lift a small lamb over a rock. I'm standing there, watching, thinking about John 10, thinking about the way Jesus described his sheep recognizing his voice. Here it is, plain as day. You don't need to understand the language fully. You just need to see the pattern the shepherd calls. The sheep follow. The trust, the recognition, the connection. It's tangible, observable, and in some funny, quiet way, deeply relatable. And that's the lesson I walk away with. The voice of the shepherd is everything, and his sheep, they just know it. Okay, let's take a moment and think about belief and belonging in a way that's, well, kind of like visiting a doctor. Imagine you walk into a doctor's office and you've already made up your mind that you're not going to follow whatever prescription or advice the doctor gives. Right from the start, you've decided it's not going to make sense. You're not going to trust it. Maybe you think, I know better, or this can't work for me. Now, here's the catch. If that's your mindset, you're not really hearing anything. You might be listening with your ears, sure, but your heart, your willingness, your openness, it's shut down. You can't absorb the advice. You can't follow the guidance because belief hasn't entered the room yet. You're already prejudging it, and this is exactly the challenge the Jews faced with Jesus. They came to him demanding proof, demanding a clear declaration. If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly. They wanted evidence, black and white, something they could point to and say, there it is. But what's crucial is that even as they asked, their hearts weren't in a place to believe. Their skepticism, their doubts, their own assumptions were blocking them. Then they weren't tuned in. They weren't part of the flock, so to speak. And Jesus points this out with that sheep analogy in John 10. His sheep hear his voice and follow him. The point is relational, not just informational. Belief, belonging, hearing, they're all connected. Think about it this way. If you go to a doctor and your mind is already made up to reject what they say, the prescription, the directions, the reasoning, none of it will make sense. You might hear the words, but you won't truly process them. You might nod, maybe even smile politely, but inside, it's a no-go. That's what it's like with Jesus. He can speak. He can show, he can heal, he can explain the truth in clear, unmistakable ways. Yet if someone's heart isn't aligned, if they haven't taken that first step of trust, the words bounce off like water on a rock. The Jewish leaders were, in effect, in that no-go zone. They were skeptical before they even tried to believe, and so they couldn't recognize his voice. They couldn't follow. They couldn't understand the relationship because they hadn't entered it. Now, this doesn't mean they were stupid or incapable. It's more like they were looking at the surface, demanding proof in the wrong way. Jesus' point wasn't, I need more witnesses, more miracles, though those were part of the story. His point was, faith is required to start. You have to be willing to listen, to hear, to engage, to belong. That's the first step. You can't skip it and jump straight to understanding. Like the sheep, they have to recognize the shepherd's voice, not just in sound, but in relationship. You follow because you trust. You trust because you know the voice. And you know the voice because you've chosen to belong. It's a circle. And it starts with that first act of believing. And here's where it gets interesting. And maybe a little tricky. Believing doesn't mean you suddenly have everything figured out. You might still have doubts. You might still have questions, and that's okay. But without that initial openness, without saying, even quietly to yourself, I want to hear, I want to follow, I want to try to understand, nothing Jesus says will land. It's not about being intellectually clever or collecting signs. It's about readiness, relationship, and willingness to enter into that belonging. The Jews' disbelief highlights this perfectly. They saw Jesus' works, the miracles, the teachings, the healings. Some of them might have even been impressed, maybe a little unsettled, but their hearts were closed. They were looking for proof they could control, proof that fit their expectations. And Jesus, patient as ever, that points them back to the deeper truth the sheep hear the shepherd. Recognition comes first, then trust, then following. Without the first step, faith, nothing else works. It's like trying to explain a medical treatment to someone who's already decided it won't help. Your words are clear, your reasoning solid, but it won't reach them. So the connection between belief, belonging, and hearing Jesus is really a lived experiential thing. You have to start with a willingness to hear, an openness to be part of the flock. Belonging isn't about a label or a title. It's about relationship and recognition. Belief isn't about ticking boxes. It's about stepping into that relationship and letting yourself be led. Once your understanding starts to grow naturally, just like the sheep, you begin to follow because you know the voice. And that's exactly what Jesus was pointing out to the Jews. You can see the works, hear the words, even demand a declaration. But if your heart hasn't taken that first step into trust and belonging, you're missing the point entirely. So yeah, it's a little like the doctor scenario. You can be skeptical, you can be cautious, you can even be demanding, but until you take that first step of faith, until you say, even quietly, I'll listen, I'll follow, I'll try to understand the prescription, the words, the teaching, all of it just floats past. Faith isn't just a concept, it's the doorway into knowing Jesus. And without that doorway, all the proofs, all the miracles, all the logic in the world, it's like talking to someone who's already decided not to hear. And that, in a nutshell, is why Jesus' message about his sheep, his voice, and his flock still resonates today. Alright, let's settle in and walk through this in a way that feels like we're just talking it out. Because honestly, the way John's gospel presents Jesus is both fascinating and a little dramatic. You see, Jesus wasn't just another teacher or miracle worker wandering through towns. No, his words and works were like signs pointing straight to his divine identity. And if you read John 10:25 to 27, it's clear the Jews are pressing him, asking, if you are the Messiah, tell us plainly. They want a straightforward answer. They're looking for a label they can slap on him, a black and white declaration. But Jesus doesn't just say, yes, I am. Instead, he points to his works as testimony, saying, I told you and you do not believe. The works I do in my Father's name testify about me. But you do not believe because you are not my sheep. Then he adds that familiar line about his sheep hearing his voice, following him, and never being snatched from his hand. Pause and picture that. He's basically saying, look, the miracles, the healings, the teachings, they're all pointing to who I am. But if your heart isn't tuned in, you'll miss it. It's kind of like watching a magician do incredible tricks, and you think, cool show, without realizing that the same person orchestrates every illusion. The identity behind the magic is the key. And for Jesus, the identity is God himself. His works aren't mere spectacle. They're evidence of divine authority at work in the world. Now, John 8:54 to 59 takes things up a notch. Jesus is in a tense debate with the Jewish leaders, and he says, my Father is working until now, and I am working. That's not a throwaway line. The crowd gets it. The leaders hear him, and they understand the gravity of his claim. And what do? They grab stones, ready to kill him. Talk about escalation. But here's the thing, their reaction proves they understood him. They knew the audacity of what he was saying. Jesus wasn't just implying closeness with God, he was claiming unity with God, claiming to be God. And then he drops the kicker before Abraham was, I am. That's not just poetic license. That's a direct echo of Exodus 3, where God tells Moses, I am who I am. In Jewish tradition, that name is sacred, signaling eternal, self-existent authority. Jesus isn't just making a metaphorical point, he's claiming the divine name for himself, stepping into the eternal identity of God. Imagine being in that crowd. You hear, before Abraham was, I am, and you're thinking, wait, that's God talking. Right. And then you see the calm authority on his face. And the logical conclusion for the leaders is blasphemy if he's lying. True worship. If he's right, no wonder they pick up stones. You can almost picture someone whispering to a friend. Did he just say that? And the friend replies, yep, he did. That's the proof in their reaction. They understood exactly what Jesus claimed. Then, flip over to John 14:1-11. Here, Jesus is talking to his disciples, prepping them for what's coming, his death, resurrection, the whole journey. He says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you know my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him." And Thomas, always the practical one, says, "Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us." Jesus answers, "Have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me? Philip, whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'?" Now, try to imagine explaining that today. It's like a parent sighing at a teenager and saying, "I've been here all along, and you still don't get it." But the point is massive. Jesus' words and actions are living proof of God himself. The disciples see him heal, teach, love, and guide. They witness him feed thousands, walk on water, calm storms, and raise the dead. It's not just skill, it's divine authority made visible. The claim is that knowing Jesus is knowing God, observing him, being with him, following him that's encountering God directly. Now, let's put it all together. John 10, John 8, John 14, they all tell a cohesive story. Jesus' works testify to his divinity. His words declare it clearly. The Jewish leaders' violent reactions, like attempting to stone him, underscore that they understood him perfectly. The audacity, the self-identification, the use of the divine "I am" from Exodus 3, they weren't missing it. Humorously, you can almost imagine a bystander thinking, well, that escalated quickly, but the tension makes sense. When someone claims what only God can claim, people react. And the "I am" statements, they're not just clever phrasing. Each one connects Jesus to God's eternal, self-existent identity. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Before Abraham was "I am," these aren't casual metaphors. They echo the name God used to reveal himself to Moses, a name loaded with authority, continuity, and divine mystery. Jesus intentionally invokes this, making his identity unmistakable, and the reactions around him outrage, disbelief, attempts on his life are themselves testimony. The people weren't confused, they understood the weight of his claims. Think about it when Jesus says, "Before Abraham was, I am." He's not inviting debate about chronology. He's declaring eternity. When he says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he's not offering just spiritual guidance. He's claiming the totality of salvation, the path to God himself. And when he tells his disciples, "Whoever has seen me has seen the Father," he's making the ultimate, unmistakable claim. These aren't abstract ideas. They are declarations of divine identity and authority, proven through his words, his works, and ultimately confirmed by the understanding and fear of those around him. So the takeaway, Jesus' miracles, teachings, and self-identifications consistently point to his divine nature. The Jewish leaders' reactions, from outrage to attempts at stoning, show they grasp the claims fully. The "I am" statements tie him directly to the God of Israel, fulfilling scripture and making the divine tangible in human form. And yes, there's a little room for irony, for the moment of humor, because the crowd's mix of awe, disbelief, and confusion almost reads like a dramatic scene in a play, except it's history, people reacting, Jesus calmly affirming, miracles happening, words spoken that echo through time. It's vivid, undeniable, and profoundly revealing. His works and words aren't just proof, they are the living demonstration that God himself has come among his people, calling his sheep, revealing his identity, and showing the way to the Father. Alright, let's talk about language and cultural context for a minute, because it's a game changer when it comes to understanding Jesus. Imagine this, you're watching an old rerun of Mr. Ed, the talking horse, and someone translates it into Spanish, but they do it super literally. So, instead of capturing the humor and timing, it just sounds awkward, and the jokes fall flat. You end up scratching your head, wondering why anyone laughed in the first place. That's basically what happens when we try to read Jesus' words without thinking about the language and culture he was speaking in. Jesus spoke Aramaic, a language with its own rhythms, idioms, and layers of meaning. The Jewish audience of his day knew those nuances. They knew the scriptures backward and forward, understood the layers of law, prophecy, and tradition, and they picked up on subtleties that fly right over our heads today. When Jesus says something like, "Before Abraham was, I am," it's not just a clever phrase. The Aramaic or Hebrew echoes the divine name from Exodus 3. To the crowd listening, that was loaded, it was audacious, clear, and unmistakable. They didn't need footnotes or cultural guides. They got it instantly. It's like they were in on the joke and the punchline all at once. Now, if we try to read that same line in English or another language without understanding the context, we might think, oh, he's just talking about time, and completely miss the divine claim he's making. It's like our Mr. Ed example, the words are there, but the meaning is lost because we don't have the cultural and linguistic frame. The humor, or in Jesus' case, the divine weight, just doesn't translate directly. You can see the importance, right? Knowing the audience, knowing the linguistic cues, even the way words were chosen, makes the difference between missing the point and being shocked by the audacity of his claim. This is why the Jewish leaders' reactions make so much sense. They didn't misunderstand him. When Jesus invoked the I am language, when he claimed oneness with the Father, they got it immediately. That's why they picked up stones. They weren't confused. They understood the claim perfectly. In our modern reading, it can be tempting to gloss over these moments, thinking, sure, they didn't get it. But that would be like watching the dubbed Mr. Ed episode and assuming the horse isn't funny. You just miss the nuances of the original language. It's also why parables and idioms matter so much. Jesus used everyday imagery: sheep, shepherds, vineyards, homes that his audience knew intimately. A sheep following its shepherd, a vine providing life, rooms in a house representing God's dwelling. These weren't abstract concepts, they were lived experiences. Without understanding that context, it's easy to miss the layered meaning. Yet the words sound simple, what? But they're packed with cultural significance and spiritual depth. So, the takeaway is this language and cultural context are crucial. Jesus' audience understood him because they were attuned to the language, the scripture, and the cultural touchstones. They heard the claims, recognized the references, and responded accordingly, sometimes with amazement, sometimes with outrage. For us today, without that context, we risk missing the richness, the audacity, and the divine weight of what he was saying. Think of it like watching Mr. Ed in Spanish. You can hear the words, but if you don't get the timing, the idioms, and the nuance, the magic just doesn't land. And in the case of Jesus, missing the context means missing the very claim of God in human form. Alright, let's talk about the miracles and works of Jesus, the stuff that really makes people stop and say, wait, who is this guy? Think about it: healing the sick, calming storms, raising the dead. These aren't just cool tricks or acts of kindness. Each one is a statement, a living demonstration of God's presence and authority moving through him. Take healing. For example, people came to him with all kinds of ailments, blindness, paralysis, leprosy, you name it, and he healed them. Imagine the scene: someone who's been sick for years suddenly standing up, walking, seeing clearly for the first time. That's not just a medical miracle. That's a declaration the kingdom of God is here, breaking into the ordinary world. And the beauty of it is, it's immediate. There's no delay, no complicated explanation, just action and restoration. People recognize something divine happening. And then there's the calming of storms. Picture this: Jesus and his disciples are in a boat, wind howling, waves crashing over the sides, and the disciples are panicking. Then he stands up and says, "Peace, be still," and the storm calms instantly. Think about that nature obeying him. Even the elements recognize his authority. That's a powerful sign that God himself is at work. It's not just metaphorical, it's literal control over creation, showing his divine command over the world. And let's not forget raising the dead, Lazarus, Jairus' daughter, the widow's son in Nain. These acts are perhaps the most striking. Life and death, the ultimate human boundary. Obey his word. People watching couldn't chalk this up to coincidence or clever planning. It's tangible proof that he's not just a good teacher or healer, he's the one with authority over life itself. Now, even John the Baptist, the one who had baptized Jesus and recognized him as Messiah, had doubts at one point. He's in prison, uncertain, maybe thinking, are you really the one we've been waiting for? So he sends his disciples to ask Jesus directly, are you the one, or should we expect someone else? And how does Jesus respond? Not with words alone, not with a declaration, but with actions. Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. See, Jesus points John back to his works. The miracles aren't just random acts, they are living proof of his identity. They reassure even someone like John the Baptist, who knew the scriptures and had expectations, that God's kingdom is present and active. It's like saying, look, if you're still wondering, pay attention to what's happening around you. This is God at work. So when we put it all together, Jesus' miracles and works healing, calming, raising the dead aren't just stories to marvel at. They're testimonies, pointing straight to his divinity, revealing God's power, presence, and authority in tangible ways. They make the abstract idea of God's kingdom visible and accessible. And the fact that even John the Baptist needed this reassurance reminds us that seeing these works helps bridge human doubt and divine reality. Jesus' actions speak for him, proving that he is not just another teacher, but God incarnate, showing his kingdom in real, undeniable ways. Okay, let's try to wrap our heads around this without turning it into a math lecture, because talking about Jesus being fully God and also the Son of God can feel like trying to juggle water. It's tricky, but there's a way to picture it that actually makes sense. Imagine God like a beam of pure white light, super bright, all-encompassing, full of everything. That's the simplest picture of God's unity and fullness. Now, when this light passes through a prism, it splits into different colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Each color is distinct, right? You can point to the blue or the red and say, yep, that's a color, but they all came from the same light. They're not separate lights, they're expressions of the same light. This is kind of how the Trinity works. God is one, pure, eternal, fully divine, that's the white light. But within that unity, God exists as three distinct persons: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They're not three different gods, they're three persons who fully share the one divine essence. Jesus is the Son, which means he is God in person, fully divine, but also the Son in relation to the Father. Think of it like looking at the blue light from the prism. It's fully part of the white light, and it shows one aspect of the full spectrum. And why call him the Son of God? Well, in human terms, it expresses relationship. The Father sends the Son is in perfect relationship with the Father, and the Holy Spirit proceeds from them both. It's not about making God sound like a family tree in the human sense that would totally fall apart if you overthink it, but it's about showing the relational aspect within the one Godhead. Like Jesus is fully God, just as fully as the Father, but he is the Son in the sense that he is God expressing himself in that personal, relational way we see in the Gospels. It's kind of like when you're standing outside on a sunny day and you see sunlight through a prism in a window. The colors are different, they have their own character, but it's all still light, and without the prism, you just see white whole, complete, undivided. The Trinity is like that. God is complete and unified, but in the way he reveals himself and interacts with creation, we see these distinct persons. The Son is God, the Father is God, the Spirit is God, yet there's only one God, one divine essence. It's like the light and the colors are inseparable but distinct in how they shine. So when the Bible calls Jesus the Son of God, it's not saying he's any less than God. He's fully God, just like the Father. But it also helps us understand his role and relationship within the Trinity. He's the one who comes into the world, the one who reveals the Father to us, who shows us God's character, love, and plan for salvation in a way that we can experience personally. He's God in action and in relationship, and that relational aspect is what the term son communicates. Honestly, it's one of those things that feels like your brain might twist in knots at first, and that's okay. The prism analogy helps one light, multiple expressions, distinct but unified. Jesus is the Son, fully God, showing us God in a way we can see, hear, and touch. And the Father and the Spirit are just as fully God, each shining in harmony, each part of the same divine light. The takeaway, one God, three persons, fully divine, fully loving, fully relational. And Jesus the Son is the prism through which we start to really see that light shining into our world. Thanks for spending this time exploring who Jesus is. Take a moment to reflect on him, his words, his works, his love. If you haven't already, consider opening your heart to him and experiencing that personal connection. Jesus is God in flesh, coming to save those who believe, and his invitation is for you too. If you enjoyed this, stick around for more reflections. We'd love to have you journey with us. There's hope and peace waiting in his presence.